And so there's nothing for it, no way in which to escape that dismal system of sewers, most of which are quite hidden from our waking eyes, those sewers which are ourselves, than to turn our gaze, to open our hearts to works of art which appeal to us for reasons we do not and can never understand. Our first reaction to them may very well be revulsion, as mine was to Wagner, a reaction not unlike that of the little brat who pulls the hair of a young lady with whom he hasn't the faintest idea he is soon to be, or perhaps already is, in love. These works and people are us, and yet not us. The parts of ourselves which we recognize as residing within them, more often than not in a subliminal fashion, are what draws our attention to them in the first place, for there can and will never be anything a fraction so dear to us as ourselves, and seeing what is best about us, reflected and ennobled in a mind superior to our own, enables us to forgive that mind its superiority, since it has deigned to allow us to partake of its holy rites, if only as startled onlookers sitting in the back row of a vast theatre. There are those simpletons who would assert that to understand a work of art is to in some sense equal it. One is hard-pressed to imagine a proclamation more preposterous, and yet it is impossible to deny that our world is immeasurably enlarged, having once gained entry, has been changed, is unrecognizable, including ourselves, which are now quite unlike the persons who had not yet made the acquaintance of the work, this immense cathedral, this interior world with its seemingly infinite number of rooms, which give the impression of multiplying each time we return, into which we enter and from which we emerge transformed. Without art, life would be a mistake. That was Herr Nietzsche's assertion. One need not agree with him. Clearly life remains an appalling mistake. But yes, art can, at least at times, make it bearable. That is indisputable. It is a different wood-bird, we hear warning Siegfried, of Mimet's treachery each time we traipse through the lush, dark forest of Act 2. Professor Feynman would have claimed that knowing the chemical composition of the bird's bowels, or having mapped out some correlation between its brain and behaviour, would make our intercourse with it all the more miraculous. But such an assertion is absurd. Reflection upon these sorts of discoveries only sets the roulette wheel of our rational mind in motion, causes the ball to settle here or there, with the result that any potential we might have had for a sensuous, aesthetic, soul-nourishing experience disappears. On the other hand, having drunk voluptuously deep of its song, any bird of flesh and feathers whose song we might now hear on a walk or in a garden will be metaphorically enhanced and enriched, will be now several, a veritable aviary of delight in a world which has blossomed into an aural opulence, of which it could previously have offered us no hint. The landscape begins to vibrate, the colours to beat like hearts, the sky to beckon, and we are, if only for a few moments, privy to Mr. Blake's revelation that the universe is most certainly to be found in a grain of sand, provided that grain of sand has all those allegorical siblings of which we have now been made aware, animal, mineral, vegetable, all of it blindingly sensuous and immediate, and with the intellect, that poisoner of experience, nowhere to be found. Some boundless space opens within us, in which the woodbird's song is no longer out there, and yet it is no more not out there than it is within us, in the gurgling of our stomachs, or in the sound of our hearts beating in our ears, if the scene is sufficiently quiet. All these things, the bird's song, the gurgling, the beating hearts, take place, rather, in a vast ocean into which we have quite disappeared. One lives for such moments, and, like a woman who spurns us the moment we inform her of our love, of the desire for her which has been driving us mad, the magic of these astonishing moments disappears quite immediately, the moment one attempts to grasp it, or becomes aware of one's desire for it to continue. Such is the world, the delightful, horrible, coquettish, sadistic world in which we find ourselves. We might return to the very same park the next day. Maybe we hear the very same woodbird, perhaps its song is nearly identical, and our mind might even recall the second act of Siegfried quite vividly. And yet there is nothing, just the idiot world with which we are every day assaulted, and of which we have grown so terribly fatigued, the familiar dysphoria, the lack of magic, the wish to be done with it all, or, at the very least, to retreat into sleep, to perhaps dream some unfamiliar bit of nonsense which entertains us with its strangeness, a gift which the being who is more truly ourselves than are we deigns to offer us every now and then, or of which it wishes to unburden itself, some small respite from the imbecility of our everyday experience. For in dreams, blockheads are men of genius, and we, who are neither geniuses nor blockheads, vomit up from some parallel universe on the other side of the black hole, which is our core. Worlds, gardens, vistas, canyons, heavens for which no waking Dantes, Brontes, Blakes, or Tolkiens could ever find words. Even our most terrifying nightmares are preferable to any waking event, for in those nightmares we are God, or gods, the whole of Olympus, nay, the primordial chaos, out of which it and they once materialized. And then there is the additional paradox. These very same works, which astonish us and throw us into selves and universes of which we had been formerly unaware, can hurl us backwards in time to selves we once were, whom we have quite forgotten, who, if we thought of them at all, seemed long-lost Eurydices, vanished into the depths of an underworld we might have wished to conquer, and from which we might have wished to recover her once again, but knew full well there was no chance of doing so. And yet there she is, stark naked, in front of us, she whom we so desperately loved, our younger self, full to bursting with sap, with desire, not the ruined self we were but a moment ago. Confronted with right melody, counterpoint, turn of phrase, interior monologue, rendered in the proper way, our present selves dissolve, and we are young, whole, in the front row of the theatre, entranced by a performance we've never seen and could never have imagined. Our love drowns us once again, as it did then. The burning within us and the suffering it created return afresh. The loss torments us as before. In this moment we travel, in an instant, through countless galaxies swirling in space, are flung this way and that, and then it is all gone. Ordinary memories return. Perhaps the next turn of the melody, some modulation we find unconvincing, an author's gaffe, a misplaced fleck in a painting, it's gone. Present tense monotony has returned to choke, harass, and ridicule us. Can we take solace that we were able to experience these miracles, however briefly? Might we become, by virtue of having had such experiences, a hair's breadth less terrified of death, find it less venomous and cruel, to accept or even embrace it as a fair price to pay for these astonishing moments and experiences, rare as they are? On a good day, perhaps, on a kind, hopeful, forgiving, sanguine afternoon, such a thing seems possible. Granted, most days and afternoons are very far from that. A sublime aesthetic experience can indeed resurrect the dead as efficaciously and persuasively as a happy, generous dream or delirious, hypnagogic state. For a moment, yes, you are embracing Eurydice again. She is every bit as real as she was 40-odd years ago. And the moment of her being ripped from you is, once more, every bit as crushing. You, who have lived a posthumous existence, you, who have been this weary ghost slogging through the mud of a world which neither knows you or could ever know you, and for which you feel, above all, contempt, you, who have been searching, constantly searching for her, though you've been utterly unaware of it, you, who felt as if you were doing something quite other, studying, enriching yourself, your mind, your heart, satisfying your boundless curiosity, how brave and wonderful you've been these many years. You pathetic, deluded fool. You've been doing nothing but grieving. All of it. Every note you played, every thought you had, all those ideas you thought your own, but which were shabbily cribbed from your betters, all your worldviews, constructed as they were, like so many houses of cheap cards bought at stationery stores in criminal neighbourhoods, overseen by fentanyl-selling thugs, reporting to mob bosses in cheap suits with their hideous, mustached wives, and their cheap, tawdry mistresses with their poofy hair. You've been looking only for her, and doing nothing other than that since that day, which was tattooed on your spirit by hordes of masked desperadoes wearing medieval helmets and wielding 12-foot branding irons dipped in satanic furnaces, all the while preparing the horses and ropes which would serve for your being drawn and quartered in front of a crowd of onlookers, which was promised you with the utmost sincerity, but which, none the less, failed to arrive. She has remained in a halo of divine light, above you, unreachable, while you descended, or, more accurately, remained on an earth which had become a perpetual hell. You would occasionally spend time with this or that person, perhaps even consider it a friendship, or, infinitely more foolishly, an affair of the heart. But inevitably, the hydrochloric acid of your gaze, intuitions, and cruelty would strip away whatever it was that you had imagined were their good and bad qualities. What would inevitably remain was only your apathy, for you had made of them inert objects, a lifelong habit and talent refined in the mists of earliest boyhood. Can you now, at least, see them as they are? Such things were not ever and are not now possible. The fantastical objects you first made of them, the inert objects they later became, the tolerable, vaguely nostalgic, seemingly human, but one is never sure persons into which they eventually appeared to transform, none of these things could ever stake a claim to being an even remotely authentic representation of these people. For they have never been, and remain to this day, nothing other than mirrors of yourself. Or, to turn it round, mannequins upon whom you stapled pieces of yourself, by means of which you entertained and soothed yourself, with compassion, curiosity, boredom, rage, tales of betrayal, you told yourself, and only yourself. They are all the same, all of a piece, ridiculous fabrications and fables. If they might indeed be actually persons with interior lives, you grant that may be possible. But whether they are or they are not is irrelevant, because they are for you, as you are for them, nothing other than animate paintings upon which you find some likeness of yourself, which makes you happy, miserable, horrified, or enraged. And they disappear like a morning mist that the sun disperses, winking out of my existence in every bit as meaningless a fashion as they winked into it. Their story, your story, my story, all written in vanishing ink. If there are footprints to be seen, they might bring forth some momentary longing, regret, or wish for vengeance, but the landscape is poised, eager, and hungry to swallow them, and you are left with only the abyss that is yourself, soothed and enchanted by the occasional metaphorical enlargement of a woodbird, yes, but hopelessly, utterly, and profoundly alone.